Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, December 27th through Sunday, January 2nd, 2021. And well, going into 2022, I should say. And this week will be a little bit less intense than the past several weeks have been, or really the past few months really have been. This is a little bit of a low key week. However, there's definitely no shortage of things to talk about because there's definitely a lot of planetary aspects and events happening this week. So, one thing is that Venus has just, recently turned retrograde in Capricorn, and here you can see it's conjoining Pluto, and Mercury will actually catch up, and so there will be this triple conjunction. It's not exact, but it's basically a triple conjunction between Mercury, Venus, and Pluto, so I'll talk about what that means. And this week, we have Jupiter is actually changing signs, so it's leaving Aquarius and entering Pisces already. So I can't believe it was only, it's already been a whole year. It was last December that Jupiter had just entered Aquarius. Now it's already entering Pisces. So that's a big deal. It's always a big deal when a relatively outer planet changes signs. Jupiter only changes signs once every year or so. So that will definitely set a different type of background tone as we go into 2022. We also have Mercury changing signs this week. Mercury will go into Aquarius after it makes that triple conjunction, and Mercury is flying right now. Mercury is actually in its pre-shadow, meaning that it will soon retrograde back over the area that it's in now. So that would indicate there's a lot of new stuff happening, and we're not fully integrating everything. And that's okay because we will sort of revisit some of the themes that are happening right now later on once Mercury turns retrograde. And last thing I wanted to mention before I get into this forecast is that I just wanted to touch base with what the moon is doing. So this week the moon will be waning, meaning it's losing light as it approaches the sun, and it will be traveling this week from Libra to Capricorn, and then we'll actually have a new moon this week in Capricorn. And just remember that the new moon is the least active phase of the lunar cycle, at least in terms of like physical activity that we can really, experience like in a physical, tangible way. So that is kind of nice, I think, to just get a little bit of a break with as far as the moon is concerned. So without further ado, let's get into the weekly forecast. On Monday, December 27th, moon is in Libra. It has already made that exact square with the sun just the day before on December 26th. But the moon is still in Libra, so it's still in the same sign that it squared the sun in, and so I would expect some restlessness. This is a third quarter moon, so third quarter moons are a little bit less intense than first quarter moons, and they're more philosophical. So right now we're kind of coming off of the high that we experienced on the 26th on Sunday. Sunday was that kind of stressful, maybe intense day. There's a lot of chaos, a lot of change going on. So we're kind of easing off of that now. We're still experiencing that influx of energy and that frenetic, scattered energy that quarter moons bring us, but it's dissipating now. The moon is still in the sign it made that square aspect, but it's not forming that exact aspect anymore. So we're just kind of coming off the tail end of that third quarter moon. That's really the main thing I see for Monday. Let's go forward to Tuesday, December 28th. Now, Tuesday, we actually have two planets changing signs. In astrology, we often call the moon a planet, even though we can debate if it's actually a planet or not. But so Tuesday, December 28th, we have not only the moon changing signs going into Jupiter, but we also going into Scorpio, but we also have Jupiter changing signs from Aquarius to Pisces. So I just thought this was sort of interesting that at the same time Jupiter enters a water sign, the moon enters a water sign as well, both kind of in the latter half of the day here. Let's see, there we go. So that's sort of interesting. So that the moon controls kind of the current tempo and the pace, the emotional focus on a daily level, on a short term level. And so that becomes a little bit more intensified and emotionally focused as the moon enters Scorpio. It is starting to make a sextile aspect with the sun, so this is a really harmonious aspect. So we may be feeling more emotional, more perceptive, more intuitive, but it's in kind of a relaxed way. It's in a harmonious way since the moon is jiving with the sun really well. And then at the same time, we have Jupiter switching signs. So, of course, that's very different. Jupiter is much, much slower than the moon. And like I said before, really sets the Jupiter, among all of the outer planets, really set the background tone for everything. So their effects are more global in scale, less personal, more societal or international in scale. It really affects all of us. And Jupiter, so the last year or so, Jupiter has been in an Aquarius. So it's been bolstering and boosting expansion of technology being in Aquarius. Over the past year or so, we've had a lot more online activity, especially with COVID type things. And it's funny because Saturn has been in Aquarius, so Saturn's been restricting technology. We've had restrictions through technology, social media, restrictions of groups. All that has come from Saturn in Aquarius over these last 1 to 2 years. But simultaneously, we have Jupiter there, so Jupiter's expanding all this technology. So that's kind of what Jupiter has done over the last year or so. Now it's entering Pisces, and so this is a much different energy. Jupiter is in domicile in Pisces, so it's very strong there, and it invites us when Jupiter's in Pisces, it invites us to explore this more philosophical side, this more dreamy side, and it's very unstructured. And this will start to hint at something that we'll experience especially more in a couple years. Actually, in about a year from now, when Saturn enters Pisces as well, we'll have Neptune, Jupiter, and Saturn in Pisces, and we'll start to experience this sort of meltdown on a societal level or a international level. There's going to be this breakdown of the structure, this death, if you will, because Pisces oftentimes indicates loss on a physical level because the focus is more non-physical, so we may be more spiritually focused, may be more intuitive. This would be an excellent time for awakening or gaining consciousness. But on the physical plane, it oftentimes does represent a loss, and that's because we're clearing out the old to make way for the new once these planets eventually enter Aries later in the 2020s. So this is all just clearing away the clutter, out with the old, in with the new. But we're not really incorporating these new elements yet. That will come more in the mid 2020s. But for now, Jupiter entering Pisces to me indicates the beginning of this sort of loss in a way, this almost death that we will all sort of experience, this metaphorical death, this ending of a cycle basically that Pisces brings. And again, that's more of a general focus. As for personally how we might experience that, again, we would feel more creative, more intuitive, and maybe more sensitive, more emotional with that Jupiter and Pisces energy for the next year. Going forward, actually, let me get back to noontime here, and then let's go forward to so Wednesday, December 29th, we actually have a few different aspects. Moon, I should just mention, continues through Scorpio. It makes a brief opposition to Uranus, so that might make us feel sort of emotionally unpredictable or maybe a little bit rebellious. There could be some clashes there, but these are not super major. It's a very quick aspect with the moon here. But we also have a few other aspects. So Mars at 11 degrees Sagittarius makes a sextile to Saturn at 11 degrees Aquarius, and this would indicate that we are feeling ambitious in a sort of philosophical way. So we're wanting to be more energized in regard to having experiences and gaining knowledge that will expand our soul. That's what Sagittarius is all about, that knowledge and those hands-on experiences. So that's kind of what we're feeling energized, motivated, ambitious, competitive about since Mars is there. And as Mars makes this sextile to Saturn, it just indicates that we're doing everything I just mentioned. We're having these ambitions toward these experiences in a way that will benefit us in a very long-term way with Saturn in Aquarius. And it could also incorporate a focus that is more abstract, more long-term, more about the group as well. So I don't know, maybe we're considering kind of how our ambitions and desires affect the groups we associate with, or also how they affect our very long-term goals or aspirations. There's kind of that mixture there, and this sextile between Saturn and Mars is really nice, I think, because sextiles are always very harmonious, and combining Saturn and Mars is very driven and goal oriented in a very short term way, and Saturn is more of like an old soul type of energy. It is also motivated and ambitious and goal oriented, but in a very long term way. So there's this kind of cooperation between our short term ambitions and our long term ambitions that kind of develops and blossoms on Wednesday. Also on Wednesday, we have Sun at 8 degrees Capricorn. It makes a square aspect to Chiron at 8 degrees Aries. This I would think of as kind of a clashing with Chiron and Aries. I always say I associate that with protests or people being very vocal about their traumas or their wounds, vocal about their past, maybe wanting to help others, but it's in a sort of self-centered way a little bit in Aries. So we're focusing on our own wounds right now and being very vocal about those. And Sun and Capricorn, so this to me would show maybe a clash between authority figures versus rebels in a way. So maybe protests against the government or people just rebelling against whatever hierarchical systems they associate with. Aries and Capricorn often represents this clash between, the individual with a quote unquote higher like authority figure basically. So I could definitely see some clashes there in those areas. Also, one more aspect today, we have Mercury passing Venus, and this is a very quick aspect as far as planets go, because Mercury is not only traveling almost, about as fast as it ever goes, but also Venus is retrograde. So Mercury makes this really quick pass over Venus, and as it does so, it makes this sort of triple conjunction between Pluto, Mercury, and Venus, all at 24 to 25 degrees Capricorn. So this to me indicates that our thoughts and our communication become centered around this change that has developed over the past week or so regarding changing circumstances regarding our financial situations and our desires, how we support ourselves. So this could have to do with very much money, income, resources. How are we allocating those? Do we have to change what we're doing? Do we have to change how we make money, or how we what we invest in with our time, our money, our energy, etc. There's a lot of change happening there since Venus has been retrograde there. But this could also pertain to relationships as well, because Venus focuses on relationships as well, and relationships are also something that we invest in with our time, energy, money. So Mercury passing this area to me just indicates, we're really bringing our attention to something that's actually been happening for over a week now regarding changes in those areas. So there could be things kind of coming to a head in those areas of our lives. Let's go forward to Thursday, December 30th. Mercury makes the exact conjunction with Pluto, so we're still experiencing those themes I just listed off, those transformations regarding our financial situations and also our interpersonal relationships. A lot of changes there. And Mercury likes to kind of change, tweak, edit as well. So it's just bringing our the mental aspect of our beings is kind of honing in on these changes and helping those changes as well. Mercury likes to be productive and improve things. So we're kind of approaching these things from a mental or logical perspective, an analytical perspective, I should say, as well. And then also we have Moon entering Sagittarius. By now it has very little light. It's not visible for most of the day, so the moon is closing out its lunar cycle. It's approaching the sun for this new moon that's coming up this week. And I really like this. Sagittarius is a kind of fun, jovial sign, and the moon winding down, we tend to feel more relaxed as the moon approaches the sun, because that kind of emotional lunar energy is winding down. It's closing out its cycle. And so this can be a little bit dark at times, literally and metaphorically. But usually it just represents our focus turning more inward. There is maybe more happening on a non-physical level or an intuitive level, but in a physical or linear sense, there's less activity as we are preparing to close out this lunar cycle. And that's why I say this week as a whole, even though there are a lot of planetary events, this week is generally pretty mild because of this, because of the moon approaching the sun, basically. Going forward to Friday, December 31st, New Year's Eve. Moon is in Sagittarius still, of course, and it actually crosses over Mars. So this is interesting because Moon crossing over Mars, especially in a fire sign, would often indicate a lot of restlessness emotionally, maybe feeling kind of aggravated or aggressive, but it could also be just feeling competitive, feeling ambitious, and everyone feeling a little bit more energized than usual. And it's in Sagittarius, so this is definitely, a fiery sign, an outgoing, competitive sign, but it's also sort of free spirited and happy go lucky. So I see this aspect as being very competitive, but maybe in sort of a fun loving way. So wanting to be, just competitive as part of a game, not really wanting to destroy ourselves or destroy each other or be vindictive in any way, but kind of just a healthy, happy, competitive energy. But again, the moon is in its dark phase here, so a lot of this might be sort of subtle or subdued. Because our emotional perception is, well, I should rephrase that. Our emotional status or energy is becoming a little bit subdued as we close out this emotional cycle. So that's where we might feel this healthy competitive nature, but it's in a almost relaxed or calm way at the same time. So worst case scenario, this could make us a little bit aggressive, especially if we have a lot of fire in our charts, or if we have a chart that's heavily ruled by Mars. But I think for most people, this would be kind of just a fun-loving, competitive energy. Going forward to Saturday, January 1st, uh, let's see, Sun trines Uranus earlier in the day here at 10 degrees. Well, Sun at 10 degrees Capricorn trines Uranus at 10 degrees Taurus. And this could really indicate a lot of things. Uranus aspects like this always are a good time for awakening and figuring things out, for having streaks of like genius or just information kind of come to us out of nowhere. We might suddenly change our perspective in a really dramatic, unexpected way, and we might learn a lot in a very sudden way. Uranus rules earthquakes and I want to say bolts of lightning, things that represent sudden change. So, and Uranus also has to do a lot with information and consciousness and, shifts in perception or awareness. So Uranus technically the sun making that aspect with Uranus is just a great time for those shifts of awakening. And I think this can sound really good. It sounds, nice to gain information and gain awareness, but at the same time, it can be very challenging at times because when we gain awareness, we it results in change basically, and change can be difficult. It can be hard becoming more aware because we have to almost shed parts of our lives like a shell, like we're like a hermit crab or something, or like a reptile shedding its skin when it grows too big. You gain that consciousness, but with consciousness also comes responsibility, and so you have to manifest that change basically. So in short, this would bring shifts in consciousness that are freeing, but also require additional responsibility from us. And the arenas that this aspect is happening in is very much financial because Sun is in Capricorn, Uranus is in Taurus. Both of these signs represent commodities, what we value, what we invest in. It's our money. Taurus is more of like cash money, like money in a short-term way or an immediate way. And Capricorn is more of like a long-term, what we're investing in, or it's our career, it's also the hierarchies that we belong to. So there could be changes in all of these areas, changes financially, changes in commodities, finances, etc. Also, let's see, about midday we have the moon entering Capricorn. So now we are really gearing up for this new moon, and again, I just want to emphasize that the new moon is always a beginning that we experience about once a month, but it's not something that we always experience in a tangible way right away. Usually we'll become very aware of what the new moon has brought once we experience the first quarter moon a week after the new moon, because that's when the seed that was planted on the new moon really, shoots up from the ground and it spreads its leaves, I guess you could say. It brings conflict because there's new developments that have arisen that are making room for themselves, and disrupting the status quo. So that comes on the first quarter moon a week from today, or a week from January 2nd, I should say. But as we gear up for this new moon, it is a more quiet time because, there may be more, excuse me, it's more that we are manifesting with our thoughts and our feelings. Um, we're not manifesting in a physical way yet, basically. But as the moon enters Capricorn, we're sort of gearing up for this new beginning on this part of the lunar cycle. Okay, going forward to January 2nd, this is where we actually have this exact new moon. You can see it here at 12 degrees Capricorn. And before I talk about that, I wanted to mention also Mercury enters Aquarius at the same time, and Sun and the Moon with this new moon aspect, it aspects Saturn. So a new moon at 12 degrees Capricorn, and it makes a semi-sextile to Saturn at 12 degrees Aquarius. I don't usually talk about semi-sextiles. They're a very minor aspect, but I thought it was worth mentioning. So, okay, so this means a few different things. Mercury entering Aquarius would mean that our thoughts and our communications become a little bit lighter in nature, going from Capricorn to Aquarius. Capricorn is much heavier and more strict, more solemn, more stoic, I guess you could say, more conservative, more prudent, and more traditional, more modest. It's a lot heavier of an energy. But as soon as the Mercury enters Aquarius, we become a lot more free spirited and a little bit more rebellious or provocative. So we're kind of thinking in a more quirky or detached way, a more experimental way, and our communications will reflect that as well. But again, like I said, Mercury is about to turn retrograde, so it will go back over this area, this very interesting area where Venus retrograde has crossed over Pluto. Those, which represents again those changes with our financial and relationship situations. Mercury will retrograde and go back there, so that indicates some baggage, I guess you could say, or something that has happened recently that we haven't fully integrated. So that is yet to come once Mercury retrogrades back into Capricorn in the near future. But back to this new moon. So I thought this new moon was very interesting because, it doesn't aspect anything really except for that small aspect with Saturn, but the area that it's in is very interesting to me because we had a conjunction with many planets, with several different planets at exactly 12 degrees Capricorn in January of 2020. And to me, that aspect alone, it was something that I saw years before, and I knew that something huge would come of that aspect. I thought it might be a war. I honestly wasn't sure what it was, but I knew it would be something that would change the world, and it would be sort of crisis related. And to me, that aspect alone, more than anything, represents, COVID beginning basically. I've heard different things about maybe it originated before January, but I think January it was sort of a tipping point and a crucial time in regard to COVID, spreading throughout the world. And so it was very much marked by that huge conjunction at 12 degrees Capricorn. Now, skip forward 2 years ahead to our time, January 2nd, 2022, and we have this new moon, which is happening at that same degree. So this to me, with all that in mind, this to me would indicate a new beginning in regard to COVID. And I could interpret this sort of one of two different ways. One way would be that it would be a new chapter stepping away from COVID, something to clear the air of this pandemic, something to I don't know, get us away from all of this and start over fresh in a way, or start over. I don't know. I could almost see something this whole situation kind of dissipating. On the other hand, I could also see it just transforming, and I almost don't even want to say this, but I could see it reinventing itself in some way and coming back, in a whole different way. But either way, I would expect some kind of dramatic change with this whole pandemic situation because of this new moon. And again, just remember what I said, that it's just like in January of 2020, most of us didn't really know about this whole situation at that time with that huge conjunction. We, all those planets lined up there, but everything was still pretty much business as usual. We didn't realize that something that was, from our point of view, was just quietly beginning in, a totally different part of the world. But we didn't realize how big it was until later on. So that's exactly what I'm talking about here, is that there's going to be a huge shift, a huge development in this whole situation, starting from January 2nd, but it's something that may not be actually realized until later on. So that's just what I would look out for. And on that sort of solemn note, that concludes my weekly forecast. And next week, I think things mellow out a little bit. We'll start to experience that new lunar phase, that new lunar cycle. But other than that, it's a pretty quiet week next week. So I'll definitely have more to talk about, but I think that can be definitely a relief to everyone to have maybe a little bit of peace, at least for now in the near future. But thanks for watching, and if anyone would like a reading, please email me at manic.mercurian@gmail.com. But thanks for watching, and I hope this information helps you in some way. But I'll see you later. Take care.